The Warden's chamber.
A circle of salt ringed the blackened table. Wax melted slowly down the spines of iron candlesticks. The Warden stood with his back to the door, his gloved hands resting behind him. Cale entered without being announced. His tunic was torn, his face streaked with ash and dried blood. But his spine was straight, his jaw set. He stopped 2 paces from the salt ring and bowed once, not deeply. Just enough. The Warden did not turn. "You burned the proof," he said. "I tried to stop her. But you didn't." Cale's mouth tightened. "No." The Warden turned slowly. "Do you believe in redemption, Cale of Veylor?" Cale flinched, just slightly. "I believe in consequence." "Then you understand what is required." The Warden stepped forward. The salt did not break beneath his feet. "You will not be trusted by the Dominion's old guard. Nor loved by its new. You will be hated by those you failed. Forgotten by those you served. But if you wish to become useful again, if you wish to be something more than broken glass, then kneel." Cale hesitated. He looked at the salt. At the wax. At the Warden's face, unreadable, unmerciful. Then he dropped to one knee. "Then rise," the Warden said. "Not as Cale of Veylor. That name is Ash." Cale rose. His voice was quiet. "Then what am I?" "You are mine," the Warden said. "And your blade will remember."
Chapter 14. When Ashes Cry for Fire.
The lower city burned, not with flame, but with the slow, invisible fire of desperation. Selene stood atop the shattered remains of a clock tower, overlooking the sprawling ruins. The slums stretched from the citadel's shadow to the broken outer walls, a landscape of cracked earth and empty windows blinking like hollow eyes. Below her, smoke curled from abandoned homes. A broken cart smoldered in a dried-up canal. Banners of the Dominion still hung limp over crumbling arches, symbols of power growing thinner by the hour. The siege had begun. Cassian climbed the rubble to stand beside her, his cloak ragged but defiant. He pressed a cracked water flask into her hands. Selene drank sparingly, feeling the grit on her teeth, the weight of dust in her lungs. "Word spreading," Cassian said. "The people know it was us. The hostages. The ones who lived." Selene nodded. She had seen it in their faces. Strangers who once turned away from her gaze now met it with something quieter, fiercer, hope. A name murmured behind shuttered windows. Chalked onto walls already crumbling. Selene. 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 She should have felt pride. Victory. All she felt was the crushing weight of what came next. In the shattered belly of the city, they made their camp, a maze of half-buried cellars, forgotten shrines, tunnels slick with old moss and blood. Their leadership gathered around a cracked pillar that had once held a statue of justice. The statue was long gone. Only the broken sword at its base remained. Meaden leaned against the stone, arms folded, her expression sharp and unreadable. "We're pinned," she said, her voice almost amused. "No supply lines. No way out. Give it a week and the people will start eating each other." Several rebels winced. A gaunt ex-merchant spat into the dust. Durand stood nearby, eyes narrowed, watching the way the others reacted. Corlin paced slowly behind him, already calculating fallback positions by muscle memory. Selene ignored the bait. "They want us to fracture," she said. "Fear is cheaper than war. They think if they starve us, we'll tear each other apart. And if we do?" The merchant demanded, hollow-eyed. "Then we remind them who the real enemy is." Cassian's hand brushed hers briefly, approval, solidarity. But Selene knew it would take more than words. It would take fire. Days blurred. Heat baked the stones. Water dwindled. The stink of rot and grief thickened in every alley. Selene moved constantly, organizing rations, tending wounds, sharing scraps of bread and fire. She sat with mothers cradling dead children. She pulled dying men from collapsed tunnels. She watched hope flicker low in gutter. But it did not die. Not yet. Durand began training in half-lit cellars and abandoned courts, his voice steady, movements clean as scripture. Corlin barked orders from the rubble, forging broken men into something sharp enough to strike. The recruits bled, cried, rose again. The city hardened. The spark came on the fifth night. A mob stormed the rebel armory near the old forum, desperate, starving, afraid. They wanted weapons. Food. Vengeance against whoever had dared hope too much. Selene met them there. Not with soldiers. Not with blades. With herself. She climbed the broken tribunal dais, the same place where the Dominion once pronounced death sentences, and stood alone. Before her, 100 faces twisted by hunger and fury. The old laws said she should silence them. The old world said she should fear them. Selene did neither. She raised her hands, palms open. "I know you're afraid," she said. Her voice rang through the broken square. "So am I." The crowd stilled, like wolves scenting something not prey, but kin. "I know you're angry. I know you're hungry. I know you're tired of surviving while they feast." She let the silence build. "They made this world. They built it from our blood. And now they want us to tear each other apart while they watch." Selene drew her dagger, the blade that had cut the first blood oath, lit the first fire, and drove it into the cracked stone at her feet. The clang of steel echoed like a tolling bell. "I am not your enemy," she said, voice rising. "The Warden is. The Dominion is. We can die alone, or we can rise together." Silence. Then a small voice from the crowd, "We have no weapons." Selene smiled, fierce, terrible. "Then we take theirs." That night, the city roared. Selene's rebels, and the people, moved like wildfire. They stormed Dominion supply caches, armed themselves with stolen blades, broke patrol lines with hammers and fury. Black market smugglers opened hidden caches. Children carried messages faster than any scout. For the first time in living memory, the Dominion's grip slipped. Smoke curled from fallen outposts. Flags were ripped from walls. Makeshift banners, bedsheets painted with a black sun, unfurled from rooftops. Duran led the first strike against the northern barracks. Corlin followed, his recruits flanking the walls with silent precision. And somewhere beyond the southern gate, the Warden watched through blood-slick glass as the fire he'd hoped to starve now consumed everything it touched. Selene stood atop the broken forum once more, her cloak snapping in the rising wind. Below her, the city was alive. Cassian stood beside her, bloodied, breathing hard, proud. She could feel the blood oath between them like a second pulse, anchoring her against the coming storm. Selene raised her voice to the heavens, the old tribunal once more hers. "We are not prisoners. We are not broken. We are the fire that will burn the chains away." The city answered, a roar that shattered stone, that made the old gods turn their heads. The Warden thought he could starve them into submission. Instead, he had taught them hunger. And now, they would devour him.
Chapter 50. The Siege Burns.
Dawn broke over the lower city like the lighting of a funeral pyre. Smoke bled from cracked chimneys and shattered rooftops, rising in ragged banners that painted the sky with soot and sunfire. The air tasted of ash and iron. The streets, once silent beneath Dominion rule, were alive now, haunted by rebels slipping through shadows, readying blades scavenged from the dead and desperate. Children ran between walls with stolen messages and knives too large for their hands. Dogs barked in the distance, echoing like war drums. Somewhere, a bell tolled, not a call to prayer, but a warning. A reckoning. Selene stood in the nave of a half-buried temple, its roof long collapsed, its altar scorched black by fire and time. Once a place of supplication, it now bore the scars of war, bullet-pocked pillars, ash-choked icons, a stained glass window shattered into teeth. Before her, a map of the lower city was pinned across the cracked altar stone, stained with old blood and older oaths. The altar had once belonged to the god of judgment. Now, it served her. Around her gathered the rebellion's flame-bearers, Cassian, Mevin, Corlin, Duran, and the hardened captains who had survived siege, execution, and the death of General Mara. None bore titles. Only scars. They stood in grim silence, armor patched with cloth, eyes lined by fatigue, resolve coiled tight beneath their skin. The Dominion holds choke points here, and here, Selene said, tapping the map. Her voice was low, controlled, not to sound calm, but to keep the room steady. They've split the city into starving quarters, each more desperate than the last. If we break them simultaneously, we open a corridor to the river, Cassian finished. Resupply. Reinforcement. A way out. Meaven leaned on a crumbling column, arms crossed, mouth tight with contempt. And into a trap. The Warden's already baiting us. That river path's too clean. Too easy. He wants us to run. Corlin folded his arms. His tunic was still damp with drying blood, his side hastily wrapped. Then we take the long path. Harder to track. Harder to stop. Duran stepped forward, pointing at a barely visible thread on the map. The priest burrows still exist. Not mapped, not patrolled. Old routes. Very deep. We move unseen, Meaven said. If we rise from beneath their boots, we burn from below. Selene looked up from the map. Her gaze met each of theirs in turn, flint on flint. Then we bait him, she said. Her hand drew new lines, not along known roads or established siege paths, but through the underways, forgotten tunnels, storm drains, crypt spines beneath the old districts. We strike where he doesn't think we still exist. We don't fight his war. We fight ours. A pause. Then Duran spoke, quiet but firm. We'll need 4 teams. Coordinated. If one fails, the others fall into isolation. Cassian nodded. I'll take the second flank with Varric and the Whisper Hands. We've mapped the eastern drain routes. Corlin exhaled through his nose. I'll take the west. That's where they'll press hardest. They'll expect a charge. I'll give them one, long enough to cover the others. Meaven's voice was drier than ash. And I'll slip past them while they watch your martyr show. I have 24 ghosts in the wallworks. Give me 2 hours, I'll be standing in their kitchens. Selene's hands pressed flat to the altar, grounding herself. And I'll lead the river team. Through the roots of the old aqueduct. It hasn't run water in a decade, but it might run fire. A cold wind slipped through the broken roof, lifting a few edges of the map. Ash swirled like falling snow. The silence in the temple thickened, the kind before an avalanche. One of the captains stepped forward, trembling slightly. What if he knows? Everyone looked at him. Selene answered. Then we make sure he regrets it. A scout burst in, breathless, blood on his brow. East quarter. A forward team's gone dark. No sign. Just blood. No fire? No burn marks. Cassian turned slowly. That's Kale. Duran's eyes narrowed. He's hunting advanced scouts. Tactically, it's smart. Spiritually, it's sadistic. Corlin's jaw tightened. He's not just fighting us. He's breaking momentum. Meaven muttered, the Warden's ghost. Burn me. We should have finished him when we had the chance. Another captain entered behind the scout, carrying a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped it slowly, inside, a rebel insignia carved into bone. The room froze. Selene stared at it for a long moment. Then she reached down and picked up a small blade from beside the altar. Its hilt was wrapped in char-stained cloth. The dagger that had cut her first blood oath. She placed it on the map, where the aqueduct line curved like a serpent. This time, she said, we take the river not as an escape, but as a promise. He thinks the river is our weakness. Let's make it his grave. Duran gave a slow nod. I'll rig the entrance tunnels. If we fall, we seal them. No Dominion bastards follow us out. Meaven smirked faintly. If we die, we do it where they least expect. And we take a piece of their world with us. Cassian looked at Selene. Say the word. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Light the paths, she said. They bowed their heads. Not in prayer. In pact. Outside, the wind howled again, not cold this time, but full of heat rising. The smell of oil and ash drifted from the streets beyond, where the rebellion stirred like coals in a dying hearth. Footsteps echoed beyond the doors. Runners ready to carry orders. Engineers whispering about charges. Young warriors sharpening blades already nicked with fear. In the upper galleries of the ruined temple, a figure watched, silent and cloaked. No one saw him. No one sensed the gaze that tracked the dagger on the altar. The figure vanished before the next gust of wind rattled the rafters. And somewhere far above, beneath the spire's hollow crown, the warden turned from his window and whispered to the dark, "Let them come." The wind had shifted. It curled through the lower city like a living thing, dragging ash and smoke in its wake, stirring the hanging rags of banners long surrendered. Somewhere distant, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from beneath the earth. From stone. From tunnels carved before memory. The rebellion had gone underground. Selene moved first. Her team slid like ghosts into the old aqueduct channel, the stone flanks choked with moss and memory. Derek crouched beside her, blade already blackened with pitch, eyes gleaming with that gambler's fire he never quite lost. Behind them came the river team, the youngest, the leanest, the ones who still believed fear could be outrun. They moved in silence, each step echoing like a prayer across wet stone. Above, the city burned, and the warden watched. From his tower high above the citadel's spire, the warden studied the streets with his pale, unblinking gaze. Around him, candlelight flickered against scorched maps and pinned reports. Below, the first charges bloomed like sparks on parchment. He did not flinch. He only whispered, "Let them come." In the western quarter, Corlin led the hammer's strike. The Dominion had expected a raid, but not an open charge. His team surged from the collapsed street front like a blood tide, howling, roaring, blades flashing beneath makeshift shields of scrap and bone. The first Dominion line buckled, not from force, but surprise. "Push through," Corlin bellowed, blood running from his side. "Make them think we're the whole storm." Fire bloomed behind them, Duran's charges lighting the lower lanes. Smoke poured through alleys, thick and cruel. The Dominion commander screamed orders above the din. But Corlin smiled, because he could already hear Meven's whisper team moving through the rafters overhead. Meven was a shadow. She and her 24 ghosts slipped through the Dominion kitchens, cellars, servant passages. Not a single door was touched. They moved like water between stone. One by one, they severed command lines, not with bombs, but with blades. A captain turned to shout orders and dropped, throat slit. A messenger ran with a scroll, and never reached the corner. In the heart of the war compound, they left only silence. Meven whispered into her crystal shard, barely audible, "Strike now." They can't hear each other. But in the tunnels near the forgeworks, 2 of her ghosts, Relin and Tassa, were cornered. Outnumbered 3-1, they fought like revenants. Tassa was stabbed through the gut and still managed to crush her attacker's windpipe with a final breath. Relin died screaming Meven's name, a war cry that echoed through the vent shafts to reach her ears. Elsewhere, a Dominion flamethrower unit pushed forward through the central causeway. Fire spilled from their tanks, turning rebels into screaming silhouettes. A boy with a hammer, no older than 15, vaulted onto one of their backs and bashed the nozzle loose. The tank exploded, taking him and 3 soldiers with it. His name was Letho. Selene would not know it. But his fire turned their flank. Selene's path through the aqueduct ended beneath the market spire, a half-collapsed tower the Dominion used as a northern rally point. Her fingers touched the old stone as if it might remember her. The air was heavy with dust, torch smoke, and the strange taste of power. "Here," she whispered. "We rise here." Derek lit the flares, green fire that spilled like venom up the wall. In every quarter, it was the signal. Duran's team breached the lower cistern tunnels, bursting upward into the Dominion's barracks like flame through floorboards. His warhammer slammed into the skull of a quartermaster who barely had time to draw breath. Behind him came rebels with ropes, nets, crude flails, everything designed not to fight clean, but to pull the world down. And it did. The Dominion screamed. Not in pain. In confusion. They were surrounded. Beneath. Within. Above. Not one angle was safe. But then came fire. A rebel sabotage team ignited the eastern fuel depot too soon, and the resulting explosion shook 3 districts. The blast took down a guard tower and half a stone bridge, but also collapsed a tunnel line. Dozens of Meven's ghosts were cut off. For a heartbeat, the tide threatened to turn. One surviving rebel, mouth filled with blood, managed to crawl into the fire line and raise a flare. It hung green in the air like a scream. Selene saw it from the aqueduct rise. Her jaw clenched. "Now," she ordered. Kale watched it all. From the rooftops, the Warden's hunter moved like a shadow torn from some god's forgotten wrath. He did not shout. He did not rage. He descended. Quiet. Surgical. A rebel scout running messages died with a broken neck before he fell. A pair of archers crouched too long, their throats opened in a single stroke. Kale did not fight battles. He bled them, piece by piece. Slower than war. Faster than thought. And when he came across Fen, a rebel courier who'd once shared bread with Meven, Kale said nothing. Just took off his ring finger and his tongue. Left them arranged in a cross on the stair. Then moved on. He found Selene. She was halfway up the inner spire stairs, flanked by 2 guards. She felt it before she saw it, the weight of the air changing, like pressure before a lightning strike. "Down," she shouted, too late. One guard slammed into the wall with enough force to crack stone. The other tried to raise a blade and found it lodged in his own chest. Kale stood in the archway. Not a word. Not a threat. His mask was gone, only a burned-scarred face, expressionless and patient. The hunter without flame. Selene raised her blade. "You're too late." Kale tilted his head, almost curious. Then lunged. Their fight wasn't pretty. It wasn't even tactical. It was brutal. Steel on steel. Elbow to throat. Brickwork shattered by impact. Selene bled first, a gash across her shoulder. Then Kale, a glancing cut at the hip. He didn't seem to feel it. "Why?" she gasped, locked against him. Kale didn't answer. Because there was no answer. Only obedience. But then, from above, a cry. "Cassian!" He hurled himself down the stairs, colliding with Kale. They tumbled. Blades clashed, fists struck. Cassian took 2 cuts to the ribs but didn't stop. He bit down on a scream, drove his shoulder into Kale's side, and threw him through a stained glass window. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was stunned breathlessness. "Go," Cassian hissed. Selene didn't argue. Outside, the battle had become chaos. Meven's teams were falling back, having done their part. Durand's people were bleeding in the barracks. Corlin had taken a spear through the thigh but still stood, barking orders. One of his lieutenants, Yaren, the boy who'd never missed a shot, was down and not getting up. Corlin didn't let himself look too long. The Dominion was regathering. But now the rebels had light. Selene emerged from the spire onto the old bridge, the iron span, just as the sun cracked through the smoke. She raised her blade. Not high. Just steady. And behind her, someone raised a tattered banner, stitched from fallen cloaks, bearing the flame mark. The rebels saw her. And charged. What followed wasn't a clean victory. It was a brawl. A bloodbath. An ending earned by exhaustion and attrition. The Dominion lines broke not from power but from belief. Selene's team held the aqueduct. Cassian rallied the flank. Meven ignited the kitchens. Durand brought the temple roof down on a Dominion officer line. Somewhere in the rubble, Kale's body vanished. But not entirely. A single black glove was found beneath a broken stair, still warm. Meven pocketed it without a word. Far above, one Dominion commander, General Artervax, veteran of the scorching wars, stood at the edge of the inner garrison wall. His hands were trembling. He saw his men breaking, saw fire in every alley. The old strategies had failed. He muttered, barely audible, "They're already inside." Then a stray bolt struck him through the throat. In his tower, the warden stood still. Watched the bridge. Watched the banner. His hands clenched behind him. "So," he whispered, "it begins." When the final bell rang, it wasn't the Dominion that rang it. It was a child, a girl with ash-streaked skin and a stolen saber, standing on the back of a broken golem. She rang it again and again. And the city began to listen. The rebellion hadn't won. But it had survived. And in the heart of the iron span, bloodied, worn, breathing hard, Selene stood. The sunlight caught her blade, and for one moment, the rising ash made wings behind her. Then, finally, it made sense to say, time. To punish. The streets were stained, not just with blood, but with victory. Selene climbed the broken spine of the iron arch, its stones still hot, its banners torn down, and looked out over the battered city. Below her, the people gathered, wounded, ash-covered, breathing hard. They looked up. They saw her. And a sound rose from the crowd, hoarse, rough, untrained, and real: Selene. 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 Not shouted in awe. Chanted in solidarity. She stood motionless at first. Then slowly, Cassian joined her. He took her hand, bloody and worn, and pressed his forehead to hers. "We did it," he whispered. Selene didn't answer at first. She closed her eyes. Listened to the chant. Felt the blood oath pulse in her chest, not pain. Power. She opened her eyes again, and saw it. Far beyond the broken gates. Across the hills. Tiny flames. Flickers in distant villages. Torches. Banners rising in answer. Not just rebellion. Rebellion made contagious. A story carried by wind and fire, by ash and will. Not just her name anymore. Not just her flame. It was theirs. Scarred, unbowed, burning, would carry it until the world itself remembered what it meant to choose freedom.
Chapter 16. Ashes and Inheritance.
The city slept like a clenched fist. Hours after the last horn had fallen silent, Ashline held its breath. The battle was over, but the silence that followed was not peace, it was aftermath. Smoke still coiled from shattered chimneys. Sparks drifted like fireflies over bodies yet to be buried. The iron span, cracked and blood-stained, stretched across the broken riverbed like a wound trying to heal. Selene stood at the edge of a ruined watchtower. The wind sliced past her like a blade, tugging at her torn cloak. Beneath her, the last embers of the lower districts flickered, burnt banners, shattered sigils, the blackened bones of Dominion towers. Even the flames felt tired now. Even fire has its limits. She didn't turn when the footsteps came. She knew them. She always had. Cassian didn't speak. He simply joined her, his presence warm against the ache in her bones. They stood together, side by side, wrapped in the quiet of a world that hadn't ended, only changed. "They're counting the dead," he said. "I know. Meaven lost 11 of her ghosts. Duran's wounded. Corlin's still standing, somehow. We've got maybe half the force we started with." Selene didn't answer right away. Her gaze was locked on the citadel in the distance. It still loomed. Silent. Waiting. But no longer untouched. "They'll come again," she said. "The Warden. Whatever's left of the Dominion." Cassian nodded. "But not tonight." A long silence passed between them. Then, "I used to think if we won," he murmured, "you'd take the throne. Rule what we saved." "I don't want a throne," she said. "I want a world I don't have to defend every time I close my eyes. And if you don't get that? I keep fighting until someone else does." Cassian reached out, lacing his fingers with hers. Their hands bore cuts, bruises, burns. Marks of war. Marks of survival. "Then let them remember us," he said. "Not for the crowns we took. But for the fire we lit." Selene's voice was quiet, but steady. "Let them inherit a story worth surviving. They stood like that for a long time, not in grief, not in triumph, but in truth. Far below, the people of Ashline began to rise. Not in rebellion. In rebuilding. They carried rubble. They lit lanterns. They sang, not in chorus, but in fragments, lullabies, prayers, half-remembered hymns. The city had not been saved. But it had been claimed. And the fire, though dimmer, still burned. At first light, a quiet procession wove through the shattered streets. Rebels, survivors, and scavengers walked side by side, their steps muffled by ash and frost. They carried no banners. Only the names of the fallen, etched on scraps of slate, whispered aloud with every step. Meaden led the way, her expression unreadable, her black coat streaked with blood and soot. She carried no blade now, only a single glove, blackened and torn, tucked into her belt. When she reached the pyres by the river, she paused. Looked skyward. Then dropped the glove into the fire. For the ghosts, she said. Durand stood near the outer gate, his arm in a sling, bruises blooming beneath his skin like old ink. He was helping build barricades from rubble and broken steel. A boy offered him a rag to wipe his brow. Durand looked at him for a long time. "What's your name?" he asked. "Letho," the boy said. Durand blinked. Then knelt. Pressed the rag back into the boy's hand. "Keep it," he said. "You've earned more than that." Corlin limped past the edge of the chapel square, where a temporary infirmary had been raised with salvaged canvas and hollow stone. He didn't speak. But every few steps, he paused to adjust someone's bandage, offer water, lift a beam. Not because anyone asked. Because someone had to. And in the market circle, an old man with no voice painted flames on the shattered walls. With red dust. With crushed berries. With his own blood. Every mark was different. But every flame burned upward. Near the edge of the city, a child stood alone beside the cracked fountain where her mother had died. Her hands were black with soot. Her eyes reflected the glow of the pyres. An older woman, face lined like bark, shoulders wrapped in a tapestry of mismatched cloth, knelt beside her, placed a ribbon of gold ash in her palm, and whispered, "Carry it." The child nodded. Said nothing. But did not let go of the ash. That night, Selene sat in the shell of the old court chamber. The fire had long since died in the hearth. The walls still bore the outlines of justice once etched there, now just smoke-stained memory. Cassian joined her again. He didn't speak, not at first. He simply sat beside her, close enough to be real. She leaned into him, and he let her. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "Then we make it," he answered. "I'm afraid." "So am I." She closed her eyes. Let the fear sit between them. Not banished. Just seen. "Next time we see the fire," she whispered, "it'll be ours." Cassian's fingers tightened around hers. "Then let it remember us." Far above the citadel, in the high tower with the broken window, the warden stood watching. His cloak was torn. His eyes ringed with ash. He had not moved since the fighting ended. A candle guttered beside him. A map burned slowly beneath his hand. And in the far distance, beyond the edge of his sight, a new fire had been lit. He did not speak. But the silence around him twisted like smoke learning how to scream.
Chapter 17. Broken Crown.
The crown was broken. But power never stays buried for long. The war was over. The Dominion had fallen. The banners were ash. The crown lay in pieces. But the city still burned. Not with fire. With memory. Ashline was quieter now. The streets bore fewer soldiers and more scars. No trumpet calls, no march of boots, only the wind, the creak of scaffolds, the mutter of people remembering how to live. The statues of the three had been pulled from their pedestals. The flame orders had disbanded, their libraries left open to the public or turned into shelters for those with nowhere else to go. The citadel stood, but it no longer ruled. In the hollow between two cracked bridges and a canal still choked with rubble, a woman walked among the market stalls unnoticed. Her cloak was plain. Her hair tied back. A leather satchel hung from her shoulder, filled not with coin or edicts but dried herbs and bandages. Selene Veylor had become something impossible, ordinary. People whispered her name still, in kitchens, at wells, in the hollowed-out archive rooms where rebels now held council. Children played games where they swung wooden swords and shouted, "No crown, no cage." The city was learning how to speak again. But Selene stayed silent. She lived in a house with ivy in the windows, where the floor creaked and water pooled under the roof after rain. Cassian slept one room over, his wounds healing slower than he admitted. They rarely spoke of what had passed in the sanctuary. Sometimes, they barely spoke at all. Yet they shared tea at dawn. They walked the city perimeter together. And some nights, when nightmares pulled them both awake, they sat by the fire until the silence softened. Selene worked, always. She carried supplies into the ravines, helped dig out the last of the trapped from the collapsed ember tunnels, read old ledgers with Meven to identify families blacklisted under the quiet purge. People offered to guard her. She refused. They offered her the ember seat again. She refused that too. She had shattered the Dominion. But what came after was not peace. It was something stranger. The sound of a story trying to end, but not quite knowing how. The signs began slowly. A Dominion archivist was found hanging upside down in the old spire tower, her tongue cut out, her hands twisted into sigils not used since the Age of Sundering. A child in the outer veil was pulled from a fire with no burns, whispering a name no one had taught her. A shepherd uncovered a mound of silver bones shaped like something between a man and a beast, and vanished the next day. Selene noticed the spiral first. Carved into the gatepost of the crown altar. Not the flame spiral, not the steady, coiled circle worn by the orders. This one was jagged. Reversed. Cut as if by shaking hands into stone that should not have cracked. She stared at it for a long time. Then, later, found another carved into a soot-stained mural near the Ember Hall. Another burned into the palm of a rebel's body recovered from the river. She did not sleep that night. Nor the night after. "You've gone pale," Meven said on the third morning, watching Selene leaf through a half-burned codex recovered from the collapsed sanctum vaults. "Worried the council will elect a drunk for speaker again?" "This symbol," Selene said, turning the page. "It's not new." Meven raised a brow. "So? Neither are nightmares." "No," Selene whispered, eyes narrowing. "But this one isn't a nightmare. It's a reminder." Meven sat, folding her arms. "Of what?" Selene didn't answer. She closed the book. And that night, she returned to the ruins of the sanctuary. Alone. The altar stood blackened but whole. The roof above was open to the sky now, a wound to the heavens that no scaffolding had yet touched. The wind carried ash in lazy spirals. And beneath her feet, the marble was darker. Brittle. Scarred. Selene knelt and brushed away dust from the altar's base. Her fingers struck something smooth. Stone. But not altar stone. A seam. She dug deeper. With nails. Then with a shard of broken blade. The false plate cracked. A sigil beneath pulsed faintly, not with firelight, but something colder. A spiral. Burned in reverse. Selene didn't hesitate. She pressed her palm to it. The floor beneath the altar shifted. A slow groan of grinding stone echoed through the sanctuary like a breath being drawn after centuries of stillness. A passage yawned open in the black. She descended. The vault was not Dominion-made. The walls pulsed with a deeper darkness, carved not with runes but with memories. The air smelled of scorched bone, of dust that had forgotten sunlight. Statues stood in niches, not of saints, but of beasts with winged faces and ash for eyes. Their mouths were open. Screaming. At the chamber's center sat a chair. Not a throne. Something more ancient. More cruel. A mirror, shaped like a seat. Made of scorched glass and woven bone. It reflected no body. Only flame. Her flame. The chamber trembled faintly as she stepped closer. "And then, you came late," said a voice from the dark. Selene turned. The woman standing there wore red so deep it bled into shadow. Her face was painted in ash. Her eyes glowed with inner ember light, not like Selene's, but something older. Something that had seen the first empire crumble and still hadn't looked away. "I saw you," Selene said quietly. "In the memory. The mirror. I left echoes behind," the woman replied. "You found one. Who are you?" "Someone who refused the crown long before you broke it." Selene frowned. "That's not possible." The woman stepped forward. "The fire remembers more than history does." Behind her, the shadows moved. Figures stood, blurred, robed, silent. Not ghosts. Not rebels. Something else. "Who are they?" "Witnesses," the woman said. "Flamewalkers. Those who chose to remember what your world tried to bury." Selene's hand found the hilt of her blade. "You're not Dominion. You're not Council. What are you?" "A warning," the woman said, softly. "And a beginning." The floor beneath Selene's feet began to pulse. Images surged, not visions, but truth: a crowned child holding a blade of bone, a city in the north sinking beneath red sands, a dome carved entirely from flame. She saw herself. And she saw others, those not yet born, already carrying fire behind their eyes. "You broke their empire," the woman said. "But something deeper was buried beneath it. And now, it stirs." Selene backed away. "I won't rule. I won't repeat their cycle." "You already have," said the woman. "You lit the flame. I did it to end things. And you did. But ending is only the first circle." The spiral beneath Selene's boots glowed. She saw it now, not as a symbol, but a map. A cycle. A cage. Her breath caught. "What do you want?" The woman stepped back into the dark. "I want nothing. I only came to watch the spiral turn." Selene emerged from the passage at dawn. The city was waking. The bells of the People's Council Tower rang. Fires were lit. A child ran past her chasing a kite shaped like a phoenix. The smoke from breakfast fires curled into the air. Cassian stood in the square, his brow furrowed. "You're bleeding," he said, stepping to her. "I'm fine." "Where did you—" "I found something under the altar," she whispered. "Or maybe it found me." He reached for her, but she stepped back. Above them, the banners stirred. Not the flame. Not the Dominion. A spiral. Woven into black. Cassian followed her gaze. "That wasn't there yesterday." Selene didn't answer. She looked beyond the city walls, to the mountains, to the east. The spiral was turning. Again. In the east, far from Ashline, in a village not marked on any map, a girl was born beneath a sky without stars. Her mother bled silver. The midwife screamed. And in the child's tiny palm, an ember pulsed once, and did not fade. Far beneath the earth, a mirror cracked. And in the darkness, something laughed. He had not spoken in hours. Around him, the scorched remnants of the citadel still steamed. Wind tugged at the black folds of his cloak. Below, the banners had fallen, the gates lay broken, and the people had begun to speak in open tones, without fear. Without reverence. But the man did not move. A raven circled once overhead and vanished beyond the cliffs. In his gloved hand, the warden held a single shard of mirrored glass, flecked with blood and soot. He turned it slowly, watching the morning sun fracture across its surface. His eyes, rimmed with sleepless red, did not blink. Behind him, on the table where once maps of conquest had unfurled, now burned a spiral. Drawn in oil. Set alight. He whispered finally, a sound like paper tearing. "They think they've ended it." Another voice stirred from the dark corner of the chamber. Softer. Almost amused. "No. They only lit a deeper fuse." The figure who stepped forward wore Dominion steel, but the insignia was wrong. Older. Reforged. They've seen your power, the warden said. They'll come hunting it next. The soldier knelt before the flaming spiral and pressed something into the soot, a small, blackened crown. Not gold. Not iron. Bone. Then let them come, he said. We have memory. We have mirrors. And fire always returns to its source. The warden turned to the east. The mountains were still veiled in morning shadow. Somewhere out there, the spiral turned. And something old, had begun to wake. Behind him, the crown smoked. And did not stop.